There is just so much talent that comes into the National Hockey League every single year from the NHL draft. And just given the opportunity that some of these rookies get, they could be really beneficial for your fantasy hockey lineups. Last year in our must draft rookie videos, we hit on 7 of the top 8 rookies and the top rookie goaltender, which paid dividends for some fantasy teams moving forward. Guys, this is always a fun one for me. It kicks off the year with a bang. These are your must draft rookies for this upcoming fantasy hockey season. All right, so we want to remember that rookies, first and foremost, don't ever reach. There's only a handful of circumstances where it actually pays off. As you can see, last year, Lane Hutson topped our list. He had over 60 points. Then you had Matej Michkov and Macklin Celebrini in that kind of 60-point range. Everyone else fell below 50 points. This is why a lot of the time it's not worth reaching on rookies. If we look at the last 3 seasons, you'll see that there's only been a handful of players that's hit over the 60-point mark. And these are all like tier 1 special generational players. You've got your Bedards, you've got your Celebrinis, you've got your Michkovs, and then Lane Hutson. And this is over the last 3 years in terms of total points for rookies. A lot of times on top of that is they don't actually play a full season, or they're, other elements that are come into consideration. Like the peripherals are oftentimes really, really low. So we always preface, don't reach on these guys. Understand which ones have upside, understand which ones have talent and opportunity around them, and which ones are going to just slot into a role, and that's going to make you very successful. Even with goaltenders, we saw Dustin Wolf, for example, last year had an incredible opportunity to be the starter in Calgary because there was really not a lot of talent altogether. He could just slot right into that starting goaltender role and move on from there. So just remember, guys, it's very, very important. The 3 criteria is talent, opportunity, and role. Got to have opportunity to play amongst really good players or be surrounded by good players. You need to play in a role that's going to have impact in fantasy hockey, and you need to be talented enough to solidify yourself as an elite player in order to get these high point total production. All right, so for this list, guys, again, keep in mind that these are people that we actually want to be drafting as well. We don't want to have to, you can take a lot of these guys with your later round picks. You could, even in your last pick of the draft, you could get a lot of these guys, especially the honorable mentions that are on my screen right now. But these are guys that we're going to be going out of our way to actually draft because we want the upside that's surrounding them. But the honorable mentions on this list are Matthew Schaefer. They also did sign a contract with him, but it's very possible that he just goes back to junior after he hits the first 9 games. The Islanders are in no rush to put this guy in the NHL, but he's just so talented that he might just get a spot on the roster outright. And in that case, I think, there is a possibility that he steals power play 1. We're going to be keeping a close eye on that in camp and see where his kind of development goes because of how talented he is. If he does get that power play 1 role, he shoots up a lot of my lists. Ryan Leonard, I think, is a great option as well if you're in a deep league or if you're in a bangers league. He's going to hit a ton. We've seen that over the sample size that he's had towards the end of last season and into the playoffs. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's going to have a spot in the top 6. The emergence of Connor McMichael, Alexei Protas, he just scored 30 goals. I don't foresee him bumping off Tom Wilson, and especially not Ovi. Isaac Howard, Matt Savoy, 2 young guys that look like they're going to be on the roster for the Edmonton Oilers. Unsure yet because we're not sure what they're doing out of camp. I would lean more towards Isaac Howard if you're going to pick one of the 2. He's more of a finisher / shooter, had a good year in the NCAA. He was the Hobey Baker winner. On to the Chicago power play 1D situation. Artem Leshnov is probably going to take over that power play 1 role. I know we saw Sam Renzel kind of come over and step into that in the last 9 games of the season where he had 5 points in that span and he shot a ton. He had 22 shots in 9 games, Sam Renzel did. But I think Leshnov is the more talented defenseman. They took him at a much higher pick. He is an incredibly offensively oriented defenseman. We haven't quite seen him yet because of the role that he's kind of played in Chicago. And I do ultimately think he ends up on the top power play. But again, something to keep in mind as we look towards training camp moving forward. Gabe Perreault, again, really talented forward. Don't think that there's a spot for him in the top 6, even though he is that talented, even though he's likely going to play a top 9 role. They still have Alexi Lafreniere there. We saw the emergence of Will Cooley, and then you've got guys like Panarin and with JT Miller coming in. It's that's already a total of 4 guys right there. Then you add Zib, and then you add Trocheck on top of that, and there's your top 6. So I don't see Perreault necessarily breaking into that top 6 unless they bump one of those guys out, in which case it'd probably be Will Cooley, and he plays more of a third line role similar to what he did last year. Or it's Alexi Lafreniere because he, again, had a down year last year. But I think for Perreault, there's probably no need to actually go and draft him. But moving forward, if he plays in the top 6, I think there is some value to him. And then Jesper Wallstedt, he will be backing up Gustafsson this year. If something does happen to Gustafsson, he automatically jumps to that Dustin Wolf territory in terms of elite goalie in an elite opportunity. And, we all saw what happened with Dustin Wolf last year. All right, guys, moving on to our actual list. Ivan Demidov of the Montreal Canadiens. Incredibly talented player, guys. Like, same level of skill and talent that you would see out of a Michkov, out of a Bedard. Like, this guy is going to be elite in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't know what it's going to look like next time, but in my opinion, he is the single guy that will hit over that 60-point threshold out of everybody on this list in terms of forwards. We saw him in the KHL, how talented he was. He was close to a point a game. He 160 shots in 65 games, 22 hits, 19 blocks are great KHL numbers. And then if you go to our projection this year, we have him for a very similar total for around 59 points in 78 games, lower on the shots, hits, and blocks rates. But again, very, very difficult to kind of predict or project rookie numbers. So keep that in mind again as you're looking at this, but he's very readily available at his ADP. I could see him having a 60-point season, and I think he gets a lot of opportunity in the top 6 for Montreal. So he kind of checks all of the boxes for me. He's talented. There's opportunity with him in the lineup to play with some talented players, and then his role is more or less solidified on that second line at this point. But Demidov is incredibly talented and should slot into the top 6 as well as that top power play unit as we saw last year. He's pretty much already slotted in. So for me, I think he's the number 1 rookie off the board. You should be looking him every single chance that you can get to get him in the later rounds, because he does have a ton of upside and a ton of talent. And I could see a very Michkov-esque season out of him. Moving on to another guy that checks a lot of the boxes is Zeev Buium of the Minnesota Wild. He is incredibly talented. There is an incredible amount of opportunity to play with some high-end players around him, and he looks like he's going to just slot into that power play 1 role. There is no reason why he shouldn't be the power play 1 defenseman in Minnesota. We saw it last year. Even though they did have Spurgeon there, they brought him into the team for playoffs, specifically for his, unique skill set in terms of he's very like Makar Quinn Hughes-esque, where he's an elite skater, he's got an elite hockey IQ, and he's a very good puck mover. So again, you saw him put up insane numbers in the NCAA. These are both the past 2 seasons, over a point a game in the NCAA over the past 2 seasons, 74 assists, 24 goals, 163 shots. So he does have a bit of a shot volume to him as well. And we project him to some very similar numbers where it's more so a little bit toned down, just because, again, you never know with rookies, and Buium probably takes a little bit of time to adjust. Again, it could be a very much a Lane Hutton situation where he will continue to get power play 1 time, but he might not start to click until like halfway through the season. But if there's a defenseman that I'm super excited for this year, that I'm arguably like trying to reach on as like a 3rd or 4th defenseman, it's potentially Zeev Buium. I could see a 60-point season out of him just with the surrounding talent. I have been waiting so long for Alexander Nikishin to come over from the KHL just because of how dominant he was as a defender. We saw, look at his point totals last year, guys. Like 17 goals in 61 games as a defenseman. He was well over 40 points. He had 156 shots, 128 hits, and 27 blocks. And that's why I'm excited about Nikishin, is because of the fact that he gets you a little bit of everything. He's got offensive upside, he's got shot volume, and he's got a banger's profile to him as well. The block totals weren't necessarily there, but as you can see, he hits a ton, he shoots at a good rate, and that's only 61 games played in terms of where we're used to seeing like an 82 game pace. Bump these numbers up a little bit accordingly. The only issue that Nikishin has that, say for example, I would take Buium over him, is the fact that he not likely slotting onto that power play 1 because of Shane Gostisbehere being there. But Nikishin, at any point, if he stays on for even gets power play 2 time, turns a ton of value because of his peripheral profile. We've seen it in the KHL. We're projecting it for him going into next season. 78 games, he's over 30 points, 5 power play points, as he likely gets power play 2 time for sure. And then his shot volume, you'd likely see rookie shot volume come down in the first little bit, but 180 hits and then 90 blocks on top of that is great for a 4th or 5th defenseman in your fantasy hockey league. Moving on to Zane Parekh of the Calgary Flames, and personally, the guy that I am probably trying to draft the most out of every rookie here, probably outside of Demidov. I do think Buium is in a better position in terms of what his outlook looks like for this upcoming year, but I think Parekh is special in terms of the caliber of offensive player that he is. He is, as you can see, his OHL stats are absolutely insane. Those aren't typos. He's over 100 points as a defenseman. He was 5th in scoring. He's scored over 30 goals as a defenseman in the past 2 seasons. He had 243 shots in 66 games. And like, I think Parekh has the most upside out of everybody on this list outside of Demidov. And I think the opportunity for him is there in Calgary. I know a lot of you have Mackenzie Weegar pegged as the power play 1 defenseman. A lot of you are drafting him accordingly, but it looks like the Calgary Flames are in the process of trying to move out Rasmus Andersson. And it's not likely that Andersson stays on this team. But what I would ask you at that point is like, okay, if they're moving that guy out, like who do they have to replace him with? It's Zane Parekh. He's going to be on the team, and he's going to be the power play 1 defenseman. There is no reason why you would ever have Mackenzie Weegar over this guy just in terms of talent for your power play or power play 2 defenseman, unless you're trying to, for whatever reason, like limit Parech's exposure or just shelter him in terms of his minutes. And I think it's very possible that, again, similar to Buium, where you could have a situation of like a Lane Hutson where this guy doesn't actually like take over the role until halfway through the year. I think it's very possible that you could have a situation like we saw with Lane Hutson last year, where it takes him a little bit for this guy to take over the role. And even though Weegar has been, decent on the power play in Calgary as of late, he is not an offensive defenseman, and he is nowhere near the level of talent and skill that Parekh has in terms of his offensive ability. I really hope that Calgary just let him open it up and just play, even if he plays around 18 minutes, like I'll be happy with that if he gets power play 1 time. Our projection for Parekh is very conservative and likely has to do with the fact that he will only be playing third pair minutes, and at this current moment doesn't get power play 1 time. If he does end up being that power play 1 defenseman, you're going to see his projection bump a ton. Speaking of projections, guys, if you want access to our in-season player projections and tools, be sure to go to fantasypuck.net and click on the link in our description to check out our Patreon, where we have projections on all players. These are live editable projections that we will be changing and adapting to throughout the entire course of the season as well, so that you guys get access to not only a projection sheet for your upcoming draft, but as you're in the season, you're going to be able to see what players project based off of the amount of games remaining to be the best players in the league based off of changes that were being made throughout the season. So be sure to check that out, guys. It's link will be in our description, or you can go to fantasypuck.net to check that out as well. Jimmy Snuggerud's in a very unique position going into next year because it looks like he's already carved himself out a top 6 role in St. Louis. We saw it at the end of last year. He was skating on that top line. He was getting top 6 minutes. He was on power play 1 time, and it looks like it's all going to be that way for next year as well. They just recently moved out Zach Bolduc, so there's even more opportunity for him to stay within this top 6 in St. Louis. Hopefully it's on that top line alongside Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich, in which I think there's a ton of upside for Snuggie to potentially get 60 plus points. He's got some goal scoring upside as well too. He has a cannon of a shot and a 1-timer. So I think given the role on his team, given the opportunity around him, probably skill higher than his talent altogether. He was a 1st-round pick, but I think Snuggie is probably a little bit more unique in the other players, where I think he has the highest floor, just given the opportunity that's already cut out for him in St. Louis. And I anticipate that he could easily hit our projection here of 42 points. The power play point totals, I think, are going to come up a ton once we confirm that he's actually on that top power play unit. The shots, I'm not 100% sure yet because it is difficult to predict for rookies. If he's getting top 6 minutes and power play 1 time, he should be a guy that you can easily get in later in your drafts that has some upside to him, given the fact that he's young and talented and has a ton of opportunity playing in a higher up role in the lineup. Guys, that will do this video. Leave a comment down below. Were there anybody in the honorable mentions list that you felt should have been included in the main content of the video? Let me know. Always love hearing your guys' opinion, but I'll see you in the next video. Have yourselves a fantastic rest of the day.